Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to the No More Perfect podcast. Forgiveness is a much needed tool in our relational toolbox. In fact, when Mark and I wrote our No More Perfect Marriages book, we identified 8 God tools that we need to use to grow a healthy marriage. And one of those is forgiveness. My guest today is going to help us unpack forgiveness. And specifically, he's going to help us understand 5 mistakes to watch for when forgiving. So Tim Tedder is a licensed counselor and a coach who spent more than 20 years helping people heal after infidelity. Tim's work comes from both professional training and personal experience. He's lived through the devastation of an affair himself and rebuilt his life around helping others do the same. Through his website, affairhealing.com, and his podcast, The Affair Recovery Room, Tim offers down-to-earth guidance that blends research, honesty, and storytelling. He believes recovery isn't just about surviving. It's about learning, growing, and writing a better story for yourself and your relationships. And Mark and I absolutely agree with that as well. Welcome to the No More Perfect podcast, Tim.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so good to be here. And your life's work, what's ended up being your life's work, came out of your life's crisis, as did ours. Can you just give us a little bit of a picture of your journey and what has brought you to where you are doing what you're doing today?
Sure. I grew up with the belief that marriage is sacred. And when I made my vows, meant them 1,000%, never expected that I would ever cross the line of infidelity in my life. I really believed that if someone had come to me even a month or two before my affair and said, we've seen into the future and you're going to cheat on your wife, I would have said, that's impossible. That is a line I will never cross. I faced that temptation before and always could pat myself on the back. I resisted it, something I would never do. And yet, when I stepped over the line, once I made that choice, I jumped in, learned how easily I could lie and deceive, and all the classic stuff of becoming emotionally and physically involved with someone else until we were found out, then went through a period of time of kind of half-truths and, getting to the point where, while I did not want to lose my marriage, wanted to fix things, but I don't know that we had the help that we really needed to have. And some of the things that were going on around us probably hindered us more than helped us, but I take full responsibility. There are things I needed to figure out and learn that I did not. And eventually down the road, I quit the effort, stepped back into the affair, and over the course of the next year or so, we moved to divorce. The affair eventually ended, my marriage ended, and I felt bad, but my attitude was, well, lesson learned, you did a bad thing, don't ever do that again. But I hadn't really learned what I needed to learn about myself. And over the course of the next few years, patterns began showing up in my life that I began to see as, oh, there's something about me I haven't figured out, and I needed to. And that began the journey of trying to be more honest about what I needed to understand, and eventually came to realize that it wasn't even just about my infidelity. It was about brokenness that was in my life before the infidelity even happened. And that's the stuff I needed to address. And I began to change, and I just began being open about my story to the people around me. And friends in my church eventually said, hey, can you go talk to this couple or this guy? They're going through similar things. And I didn't go with all the answers. I just went with a story and with, well, here's some things I figured out that I wish I knew before. And eventually, some of those same friends encouraged me to consider going into counseling, which I kind of laughed at for a while. I didn't feel qualified to go into any kind of ministry again. But the counseling took root. I did go back and, through the course of things, started working with people, and this became my focus. created the
Wow.
website, some years ago, and the podcast. And it's my passionate to help people work through things that I failed to get through soon enough to be able to
Yeah.
save my own marriage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
You
when
know,
a
you,
marriage can't be saved, to still help them learn and heal from that too.
right. Right. Because it takes two to be able to make that healing happen. And, you said something that I think, you said, things went on, my marriage eventually ended. And, I thought I learned my lesson,
Yeah.
but eventually I began to see that there were some things I didn't know about me.
Yep.
I really want to kind of like hone in on those words for just a little bit because, one of the things that Mark and I say in our No More Perfect Marriages book is when I'm a better me, we're a better we. And a lot of times when couples are healing from infidelity or just a very dark season in their marriage, they think that they need couples work, and they probably do. But Mark and I like to say it's 70-30. It's about 70% personal work and about 30% couple work. Would you agree with that? What's been your experience?
Well, I would. And in my own work and in my own life, I've really come to the point of saying, well, there does need to be a big focus on how each partner deals with their own stuff. But especially, the common denominator to those couples that really seem to not only somehow survive infidelity, but learn, grow, and become somebody's different in a relationship or a marriage that's different on the other side. Yes, it's the work of both of them. But man, if the person that broke trust fails to do their work to really understand themselves and what needs to they need to give attention to, not only to give some reason to why did I cheat? How do I understand my vulnerabilities and the brokenness in me that kind of led me to that choice, but
Yes.
also to paint a clear picture of this is what change looks like in my life. If forgiveness and redemption is going to come, here's how you're going to be witness to that. Here's the evidence to you that you can trust me, not just, I'm sorry I did it. I feel bad. I feel shameful. I feel guilty. And I'm never going to do that again. Well, we made promises before that we intended to keep and we broke them. So why do we even feel that we can trust ourselves moving forward? I really think it is being willing to be open enough to get into that work to understand what was it in me that made me vulnerable, not only to infidelity, but maybe to the lack of real connection or intimacy in my marriage, my failure to show up when I needed to. And for me, that was, there was like two pillars that I needed to build in my life. One was learning how to be genuinely vulnerable so I could experience real intimacy, because my view of intimacy and connection was very different before. It was very selfish, I can recognize now. But
Yes.
to learn vulnerability, and the other one that goes along with it is, what does it really mean to be authentic, to be real, to be honest, to show up? And so many betrayers on the other side, they generally feel bad and they want things to be better. They don't want to lose their marriage, but they still haven't learned how to show up. There's still the same things that help bind them, the shame that was, hidden in their lives before, the things that have never been attended to are still kind of left down in that secret basement. They may never cheat again, but the other things that have never been brought to light are never dealt with. And that's what they need to understand. And not only is it better for their partners, their spouses, their marriages, but it's freeing for them too, to realize, oh, this is who I'm meant to be. And even from that perspective, the recreations, we're being made new. Well, what does that look like? What does that really mean in practical sense? Well, that's the changes we need to understand of the work that needs to be done. So I've really moved to focus most of my work on spending time with people who have broken trust, who have had affairs or infidelity of some sort, to really move them through the process of gaining insight into those needs in their life and to understand what does it mean to change those? How do you communicate that change to your partner so that then they see the evidence of, oh, you're not just sorry for what you did and making some promise again you won't do it. I can begin to trust you because I see these things are beginning to shift in your life. And that brings a new kind of hope, I think, into marriages.
It sure does. One of the things that Mark and I also say is that the trust breaker is the trust maker. And that's really what you're talking about there. And one way that you become trustworthy is that your partner sees you doing the work, the trying to figure it out, and what makes me, like you said, what's made me vulnerable to this. In what way was that? Was that touching a deep need in me? I know when my husband really looked at what caused him to be vulnerable, he would have said the same thing as you. He went into it 100%, and he was a pastor. And so, and he will say the very things that I counseled people not to do, I ended up doing. And so, but the going back into childhood, big important part, or the formative years of your life.
Agreed. Yeah.
It's huge.
Well,
And
when I was in counseling and the counselor said, let's talk about your family of origin, I think I rolled my eyes and went, oh, come on. I'm a grown man. What does that have to do with anything? But, oh, yeah, we learned some things along the way for sure.
Yeah, kind of had to do with everything, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the way I see it, we often think of relationships, marriages, like two people agreeing to build this home together. And if a relationship is the home, I mean, I would build a strong case for saying that the foundation of that home is trust. I mean, love, faith, all those things really weave into the quality of what that relationship becomes, but trust is the foundation. And a lot of times when infidelity happens and trust is broken, there's just a lot of effort to, let's get that foundation built up again. But the way I see it is the foundation breaks open and it exposes the secret thing underneath, this basement that's been down there that the betrayed partner had no idea probably what was going on. And you can't just, let's build the foundation up and make sure that we never go down in the basement again. I think it really is about, we need to expose that stuff that's down there, be honest about it, own it, realize what needs to change. And then the foundation is built below all of that stuff. I mean, the darkness stuff is swept out of it, but we integrate all those things that we used to keep private and keep secret, and they're redeemed and they're brought into what everything is so that we can be open and honest and authentic. And I think that secures, a stronger marriage.
Yes, yes. We need to excavate that basement.
Yes.
Right? That is so true. Oh my goodness. Because when Mark began to dig into his basement, he began to realize he learned to cover up. He learned to be dishonest as a form of survival in his home of origin. And it's not always just what happened in our home with our parents. Sometimes it's also with coaches, with teachers, with bullying at school. It's like we just learned how to survive what we had to deal with. And we don't realize how that then puts almost like a crack in the foundation. Right. And so that was so insightful for him to go, oh, the whole deception thing has been there for a really long time. And then that would keep him from being vulnerable in our marriage. Right. And what I will also say is, as the one who was betrayed, I also had to do some excavating in my basement.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I will say is, I didn't cause Mark's affair, but I contributed to the dysfunction in our marriage. And so I had to look at the ways I broke his trust. I broke his trust with criticism. I broke his, those kind of things that it wasn't the same as the way that he broke my trust.
Right.
But I also had to be willing to look at that. And where did that come from? That came from perfectionism and growing up in a very loving home and a very loving family, but one that, really affirmed accomplishment and achievement, which creates a perfectionist sometimes.
Yeah, I think when we say our vows, breaking vows isn't just about infidelity. I mean, we're saying those vows, you're saying, you can trust me that I'm going to continue loving you for better, for worse, all of those sort of things. And it's not just a promise of what I'm going to leave out. In fact, primarily, it's a promise of what I'm going to bring into this relationship. And yeah, trust breaking isn't just about infidelity. Trust is about a failure to love you the way I promised to love you. And we all bring our stuff. None of us gets it perfectly, but being able to own it and saying, yeah, there are ways I didn't show up. There are ways I think you wanted me to love you and expected me to love you that I haven't. And we can own those things and move towards healing and change in those as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about this topic of forgiveness. It is such a key part of the healing process. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions. One of them that we deal with in our work with couples is sometimes people are afraid to forgive because they feel like if I forgive, I'm going to have to trust. And that's one of the big things that we really talk about is no, 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 no. Those are
Yes,
actually two different journeys.
correct. I agree.
They're not even the only thing way that they're connected is oftentimes it is hard for someone to rebuild trust if your heart is hard and unable to offer some forgiveness. So it kind of we like to describe rebuilding trust as like you had a bathtub that was filled with water and the water represented trust, and now the bathtub is empty. And if you try to rebuild trust, or when you rebuild trust, you're actually putting water back in the bathtub, like 1 tablespoon, 1/4 cup at a time. It's a process, but unforgiveness keeps a lid on the bathtub. Like they can't begin to rebuild trust until at least they have a little bit of ability to put water back in that bathtub. That's kind of what we will often talk about. But we also want people to not forgive too quickly. We want them to understand forgiveness. So let's talk through what you say are the 5 mistakes that we need to be aware of and steer clear of when it comes to forgiving. So you first talk about premature forgiveness. Talk about that.
Yeah, premature forgiveness is the kind of forgiveness that just shows up almost immediately, very quickly. Like, oh, you've done an offense against me. Well, I'm going to forgive that. And many times I think that comes out of, a culture, many times in the church, the spiritual ideal that, well, we're supposed to forgive 70 times 7. So that's the default. Something done against me, I just forgive. And it's a choice that's made before we've really been able to process even the offense that's done against us. And in infidelity, of course, the offense is a big offense. It's a big wound. And I've had people come into my office before within a day or two of finding out about infidelity. And it hasn't happened often, but it has happened on a couple occasions. The other person, the person that's been hurt says, well, I've already forgiven them. We just need help of how do we move on from here? And I just, I don't quickly challenge that. I just know what's going to happen in the next few days. I know when they come in the next few days or in the next week, it's going to be a whole different story. Because I think we have to feel the offense. We have to be able to know what that hurt feels like in order to properly forgive it. It's not just something that, we decide to do because we have to do it. So especially when there's a big offense, small offenses we can forgive quickly. But big, deep offenses, I think it takes time for us to, first of all, understand what has happened. What does that mean? How do I experience that? And then how do I learn to let go of that and not hold the offense against that offense against the person anymore. And of course, if the marriage is going to heal, there has to be a sense of repentance in there and remorse and all that stuff that has to happen too, along with the forgiveness. But yeah, that instant kind of forgiveness, it doesn't work. And if someone moves to that position and just sticks with it, what I observe, you probably observe it too, that wound is just kind of buried. And it turns into more of an inward pain that's not healed, oftentimes in an inward kind of criticism that never gets to come out and be processed in the right way so that it can genuinely be put aside. That person always feels that coming up, and they may bite their tongue and never say it out loud, but it's always that thing that comes up in a sense of anger or bitterness or, critical thinking.
Yes. And, along the same lines of that, one of the things that I also identified is that forgiveness is very layered. And so I found that I had to forgive lots of layers. Like, I had to forgive how our money was used during that time. I had to forgive the risks he took, health risks. I had to forgive, the places where our kids could have found out. It was like there were just so many. I had to forgive when he was deceptive about who he was on the phone with. Like, that's one of the things I find is that forgiveness isn't just once and done either. It is, and part of that is working through that grief.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
know, you begin to, you recognize it's not, so a lot of times I hear people go, but I thought I had forgiven them. It's like, okay, but this is another layer.
Yes. Yeah.
This
And
is
that doesn't
another,
mean that what you did wasn't genuine. It wasn't real, but it's rare. And I don't know if I ever know a real clear example where someone feels that tremendous betrayal and the full pain of that and then says, okay, I forgive you, and never has to deal with the struggle of that again. It is a process for most of us that we have to take a step of forgiveness, come back to that again until maybe we get to the point where finally, yeah, that does stay in the past. It's processed. I never have to bring it, into the present.
yes, exactly. And a lot of those become triggers. And sometimes when there's a trigger and our partner, if we share it with our partner, you're not going to necessarily share all of them, but if we share it and our partner, the one who broke the trust, actually handles it well, that becomes a part of our healing and our ability to forgive that even more.
Yeah. And I want to be really clear. When I say getting to a place of forgiveness and being able to leave it in the past, I don't mean that we can never talk about it again. It never comes to mind. Of course it does. And that's what a lot of people come to say. I thought I forgave them, but something triggered me and I felt all of those things again. Well, said, of course you did. That's what reminders are going to do. What forgiveness looks like in that moment, though, is that the choice that it's made when the pain or the fear is triggered again, is that we don't reach back, pull the offense into the present, and now use it as a weapon against the person or accuse them. We can speak honestly about the pain or fear and share that with our partner, saying, man, this triggered me today and it made me feel the pain of that. And that invites them to offer comfort or assurance to us. But once we reach back and use the past offense as a weapon, defensively or in anger or whatever, then, it's hard not to react defensively against something like that. But
Well, and then you're now talking about the second place to be real careful about in that is fake forgiveness, because it covers, you said, unresolved pain while bitterness seeps out in silence or passive aggressive behavior. Talk a little more even about that.
yeah, and I think sometimes often if we over spiritualize forgiveness, this can be one of the traps, is that we will just say we've forgiven, but
Mm.
we haven't. It just remains unresolved underneath us. But put on the smile, we move forward, and and it's just over and over again, it shows up, and we just say, well, I don't need to talk about it anymore. And gritting our teeth, just move forward. But it's all just held inward. Right. And it's not real. We still feel the bitterness of it. We still accuse in our minds. But we can say, but I forgave them. It minimizes or ignores the hurt. We just want to be people that can say, well, I've done that. And I mean, I've heard people say that in the middle of them actually attacking their partner, but they will say, but I forgave you, but I forgive you. I'm going, well, I don't think that's what forgiveness looks like, but it's just that attempt to kind of just hold it in and pretend. It's a pretending kind of forgiveness. And it's still showing up. Again, not just in pain or fear, that those are real, natural, normal reminders of offense, but it's showing up in anger. But we grit our teeth, put a smile on our face, and we pretend that we have forgiven. But it's not resolved. It's not healed. It doesn't allow us to heal until we bring it out and deal with it honestly, process it, and then really make that choice to, eventually it does recede into the past.
Yeah. Yeah. You also talk about a mistake that people make, and that is bartered forgiveness. So bartered forgiveness weaponizes the past, and it kind of turns forgiveness into a bargaining chip. So talk about that.
There was an incident when one of my sons, probably early junior high age, he'd gone to his mother to ask if he could do something, and she said no. And it upset him. And in just an act of defiance, he picked up a toy gun just to point it at her, just a terrible, but just trying to show how angry, like I would want to shoot you. And he doesn't have that kind of spirit, would never want to hurt his mom, but he was that angry he did it. Well, the toy gun was a BB gun that was loaded. And when he pulled the trigger, the BB went between her eyes.
Oh my.
And it didn't, long story short, it really didn't do a lot of damage. But, when you get a wound in your head, I mean, blood was splurting everywhere. It was pouring down. And he panicked. I mean, he thought, I've killed my mother. And there was just all this immediate guilt and shame. And of course, she ran in to make sure she was fine, and she was. And it looked like the BB had just popped out, found out about 20 years later with an x-ray that it stayed in her head the whole time. But anyway, he panicked, and, she took off the sweatshirt, and cleaned herself up, and eventually told him, listen, I know you didn't mean that, and saw the pain and the shame that was building in him, and really tried to give assurance to him, like, this is okay, and generally forgave him. But what if she had instead gone and cleaned herself up and took that bloody sweatshirt, folded it up, put it in the closet, and the next time her son came to her and had a little bit of attitude or disagreed, was upset, she just said, here, wait here a moment, and went to the closet, put the sweatshirt back on, and stood in front of him with the bloody sweatshirt. Now, what were we talking about? And I know my son. I mean, the shame that would have settled over him, it would have shut him down. It would have been an effective tool, but it would have been the opposite of forgiveness. Like, yeah, sure, I'll forgive you until I can use this to my advantage again, to keep reminding you. And infidelity, that's an easy thing to keep bringing into the present. Well, at least I didn't cheat like you did. That can be a very effective weapon in a lot of ways if you just want to shut somebody down. But that's right. Using forgiveness. I will forgive you as long as you're going along with what I want and what I need. I will forgive you as long as I'm getting what I want. But the moment it becomes to my advantage to bring up this again, to use it against you, to my advantage, that's a bartering that you need to make sure your behavior stays in check so that that you don't have to fear this being brought up again. But yeah, I
Mm.
think those are the, three of the major things, strategies I see people using that are the substitutes for what genuine forgiveness looks like, And sometimes we have to forgive just out of choice, because the offender isn't coming with the proper kind of remorse. I mean, I think we could choose to forgive and
Is that
let
the
that.
decisional
Yeah, that's
forgiveness that
yeah,
you
that,
talk
that's more.
about?
That's a decisional, and I don't think that it's. I don't think that it's. There's something that's missing in there. There's an emotional, I think, relief that's missing. I think the example of that in my own life was when we were divorced, and I mean, that was never my intent to end a marriage. I wasn't at the place where I was a good partner to heal things again. It took me way too long to get there, and by then she was already remarried. But I genuinely said to my wife, "I'm sorry," and I did that. I wasn't. That wasn't pretending. I was really sorry for what I did. But I did it with. It was almost just a statement. Like, I didn't mean to do this. I'm sorry. She didn't see the evidence in me of the kind of brokenness that I really understood what I had done to her. But she still chose to forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it was a process for her. There were sometimes it would be easy to bring that up, but I saw the demonstration of her forgiving. Years later, when things broke in me and I began really seeing myself, not only for the history of my life and the brokenness in me, but for the first time had some sense of what I had done to her.
Yes.
She was the first person I called just to say in a new, through tears. I mean, when that broke in me, I mean, I couldn't even talk for a long time with anybody, but she was the first person I reached out to talk and said, "I'm sorry." But I said it from a different place. I said it from a place of real, genuine remorse and brokenness. And I think at that point, her ability to not only take that decision, but add into the emotional relief, and that's what I just call the completed forgiveness, or sometimes the fuller forgiveness. When the person who has caused the offense comes and demonstrates that remorse, there is emotional relief that can happen there that just making the decision doesn't necessarily come. But not everybody gets that, not every partner gets, most don't, I bet. If the infidelity turns into them never acknowledging that, and maybe it's the ending of a relationship or a marriage, I think it's rare that afterwards the person comes in a state of brokenness. It's just, we move on. Mistakes were made. Let's move on from it. But when it happens, there's definitely another level of healing that I think can come into that encounter.
I agree. Yes. Yes. What led to that broken place for you?
When I left my family and my marriage, I was pretty much abandoned everything spiritually. Yeah, I say, well. So I think I floundered there. And when that began to shift back, that was certainly a part of it. But I know, and I can point to other examples of experiences during that time that kind of softened me. But the thing I remember most was going to my oldest daughter's, I think it was her 16th birthday party. And in my family, I mean, we were divorced at the time, and in my family growing up, I was always the creative person in our family. I would put together events and birthdays and come up with really creative things. And I was the one who put that together and made things really special. So when it was coming up to my daughter's 16th birthday, I reached out to her mom and I said, "Hey, how can I help? What can I do?" And she said, "Well, you can bring the chips."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm bringing the chips, and I'm bringing it. And I did. I brought the chips, but I also brought it into an environment where there's just a lot of family and people that knew. I mean, there's just a lot of shame that was wrapped up in that whole experience for me to be in a place and realizing, man, this is not the situation I imagined, the experience I imagined when I was young and thinking about marriage and having a family and what's that going to be like as my kids get older and they're turning 16 and they're graduating and they're learning to drive and they're going to college and they're starting their careers and they're having their own kids. And you just imagine, what's it going to be like? What am I going to be like? I'm going to be the greatest dad, the greatest grandfather. And here I am bringing chips to my daughter's 16th birthday and feeling a little ostracized because people are uncomfortable with me being there. And I remember just leaving feeling, wow, that's so different from everything I thought it would be. And I don't remember going to bed that night with any particular heaviness other than just the sorrow of feeling like, well, that's hurtful. That's disappointing. And I knew I was responsible, but it was something that happened that night. And honestly, Jill, I don't know. Something turned in me that night. I don't know if it was in a dream or just whatever, but I woke myself because I was sobbing.
Mm.
I woke up because I heard myself sobbing and I felt myself sobbing. And I woke up and I think I said earlier, I think probably for 40, 45 minutes, I could not control that. I was just sobbing. I couldn't talk. I could hardly catch my breath, but it was a brokenness in me that I had never experienced before. And that was the beginning of shifts for me.
Wow. Wow.
I wish I could find a way of inducing that into the life of everybody that's betrayed. A lot of people, I think, even I know it'd be better if I got there. I said, well, it's a process and you've got to learn to be honest with yourself and open to these things. I can't give you a pill that breaks you down like that. But I know once you get there and you feel that kind of remorse and you can communicate it to the people that you hurt and wounded, it's going to be healing for them and it's going to be healing for you too. That's the completed forgiveness when it all comes around to that.
Yes, I totally. Yeah, so powerful. So powerful. Yeah, that definitely, really, it's a form of surrender when you get to that place, don't you think? Like you just,
definitely. I mean, I think all pride and self-preservation was just falling away. Like,
yes, exactly. Yeah, so very powerful, so powerful. So really, what we ended up talking through is particularly three parts of forgiveness, three mistakes that we want to watch for when forgiving. And those are when we want to watch for premature forgiveness, we
doing
want
it
to
too
watch
quickly.
for, fake forgiveness. And we want to be aware of bartered forgiveness. And then the last two that we talked about, decisional forgiveness, may be what you have to do, even if the other person isn't asking for your forgiveness or they don't understand the hurt. So that decisional forgiveness is really where you're going to have to clean up your heart with the Lord. You're going to have to I like to describe forgiveness as uncluttering our heart and handing over what's in there and keeping us kind of poisoned, or handing that to Jesus and saying, I can't carry this anymore. I got to give it to you. Right. And, so decisional, you're going to do that, even if there's not going to be rebuilt trust or, a relationship that is going to be, healed.
Yeah. And I would say, I don't see how Christians have an option. That's something
Absolutely, I
like you've
agree
been
with you.
forgiven. How can you not forgive? It's kind of, but even when I'm working with people that don't come from a faith background, some of them will say, well, I shouldn't have to forgive. I don't have to forgive. I said, well, no one's going to force you to do that. But I can tell you what the outcome of people, what it looks like in their lives if they don't forgive, and what it looks like to the people that do forgive. And you're going to be better off if you can find, in your own healing, if you can find your way to forgiveness, even if you're with a partner who never expresses the sorrow, regret for what they've done.
Yeah. Yeah. And completed forgiveness may be with a relationship that's restored, and it may not be.
Right. In my case, it wasn't, it was too late to restore the marriage, but it still allowed for that fuller kind of forgiveness. And as the forgiver, we can't control that. the opportunity to complete it. It's what's happening in the life of the person that caused the offense. And do they get to the place of that genuine brokenness and remorse where they can come and express that to us and ask to be forgiven? And even if we've made the decision, the choice to forgive before, I think there's a new way that we can bring that kind of emotional release into yes, of course.
Yeah, I'm sure that was that way for your wife, your ex-wife, when, she had probably come to a place of decisional forgiveness, but then when you came to her in such a broken way, that really touched probably a very special place for her, I would imagine.
I've never been hurt like that before. No one's ever betrayed me. I see it all around me. I've been witness to it many, many times in my work, but I've never experienced that level of hurt myself. But I've experienced other kinds of hurt before. And I know the difference that it makes to me when the person that caused the offense comes and owns it. And they are genuinely sorry. I mean, there's a softening that comes in me that's puts on top of whatever I've chosen to forgive before.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this has been such a good conversation. Thank you so much, Tim. Really, really appreciate it. So if someone's listening and they'd like to learn more about you or the resources that you offer, where's the best place for them to find you?
Affairhealing.com. Yeah. And I've got newsletter they can sign up for. Go to the Renovate tab if you're someone who's broken trust and wants to know more about that. But, and just the resources I provide, the podcast, the articles, along with the good things that you're offering them, they can kind of get my take on some of those things too. But that's the best place to find all of that.
I love it. Very, very good. We'll make sure that the link to that is in the show notes. So if you're listening, just check out the show notes. We'll make it easy for you to click and get over to Tim's website. So, Tim, would you be willing to pray for our listeners?
Sure. God, we thank you for not only giving this opportunity to be people who can be forgiving, but showing us how that works.
Yeah.
And allowing us to experience undeserved forgiveness in our life, to know what grace is like, to be able to live in that place, but then be able to offer that to others. And God, I'm just mindful of the people who might be listening to this that are struggling with forgiveness, because it can be hard when such a wound has been inflicted. I just pray for grace in their life to be able to choose to forgive. And for those who have offended, their hearts would eventually be softened so that they can be part of completed forgiveness. What a wonderful thing that is as well. And we thank you for that. Amen.
Amen.